Hey, hey! Victory and praises, everyone. Welcome. I'm Casey the Space Shaman, and I have a beautiful guest today. My teacher in the Paqo tradition, or the Qatari tradition, I should say, Don Zane Kerfman. So, Zane, you're probably going to be new for some people on my channel. So, if you could just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, my name's Zane Kerfman.
Just introduce yourself. Oops, sorry, one second. I had my YouTube up because we've had issues where we did an entire almost hour-long live stream, and everyone just saw a black screen for the entire hour. So I wanted to just confirm that we were actually live. So sorry about that.
No
so
worries.
Go ahead.
No worries. So my name's Zane Kerfman. Don is really just a term of respect. It's like saying "dear sir" or "respected sir." So some people sometimes think my name is Don, and my name isn't Don at all. That's just a title. But a lot of my godchildren and students call me Don Zane or Don Zano. So I am a spiritual leader who has devoted my entire adult life to the traditions of the Peruvian Andes, the indigenous traditions of they come from mostly in Peru, but also in Bolivia, the Kalawaya tradition. And this is a living tradition of, we call it shamanism in the West. Of course, that's not their word for it there. Their word is Paqo for it, and curanderismo. But we see it as a nature mystic tradition because nature is our primary teacher in this tradition. It's the way that we learn to facilitate healings and other types of spiritual work. So it's an indigenous tradition from Peru, and it helps. My big calling toward it is that it gives us a window into the archaic past, a window, but I hate to even say archaic past because that's kind of a misnomer. That's kind of incorrect to what we are witnessing here. We're witnessing certain cultures and certain tribal affiliations that have held on to their traditional way of approaching reality. And they have brought that Stone Age, and I mean that in complete respect. They have brought that Stone Age wisdom into our modern world. What I mean by that is we as a culture had a dark ages. The Western culture had this dark ages that happened. And during that period of time, we eradicated much of our traditional wisdom and knowledge, much of what we had brought forward from the Stone Age, we eradicated and decided that we were smarter than that now, and that we had better ways of going about things. First, it was through the movement of Christianity, and then it was through the Illumination movement that started in the 1700s, which was when we started to try to revisit those ancient traditions a bit and bring them into the modern context. But we were doing it through a reductionist view of Newtonian physics and natural science. And we were reducing what we originally had and trying to make those ancient mystery schools fit into this modern scientific worldview. And then, of course, as we move forward, we even kind of ditched that starting in about the 1920s. We started to throw that away. So what these traditions from Peru and other indigenous areas do is they give us a window into our collective past. But more than that, they also show us how we may have developed if we had not thrown away those techniques, had not thrown away that worldview. You know, I guess you could kind of see it as the same type of quality that we envision with steampunk. You know, steampunk taking this steam powered knowledge and moving it into the future. Well, this is a window into our archaic Stone Age technologies and how those have developed now into our modern day.
The Paqo tradition is steampunk shamanism for the modern age.
Well, kind of. It wouldn't be steampunk though. I was just using that as an analogy.
I know you were. I just
Yeah, yeah.
couldn't help myself. I had to say.
Yeah. It wouldn't really be that so much as it, but it really does give us a window that allows us to navigate those ancient techniques and ancient schools of thought that were indigenous even to the West. Even Christianity can be looked at from the view of these traditions. And that's the one other thing about it is they are spiritual traditions and not so much religions. Though it is proper to call them the traditional religions of the Andes, the way that they looked at things was more like a process of evaluating your reality. So you can be a Christian and apply these techniques to Christianity. You can be a Buddhist and apply this spiritual practice to Buddhism. You could be a Hindu and apply this to Hinduism if you wanted to. And it just gives us a brand new way of kind of evaluating and looking at our lives, a new way of introspecting the quality of life. And it gives us a way of approaching reality that opens up new avenues and potentialities for our unfoldment.
So one of the things I love, we were just talking about, I love so much about this tradition is that it's when you reach the highest current level of priesthood, the fourth level of priesthood, you kind of have the most ability to see the beauty in all of the other levels. And you have the ability to kind of, as you said, meet people where they're at in regards to where they're at in their conscious evolution, and then also see the beauty in every other tradition and truly appreciate that. So rather than like reaching the top level and kind of being on a pedestal and saying, oh yeah, I'm a fourth level Andean priest, or be able to truly, even more deeply than the other levels, be able to appreciate how beautiful and perfect all these other levels and religions and traditions truly are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and that's partly because of the Andean way of looking at things. They don't have a strict hierarchy. In so many other traditions, there's a strict hierarchy. And in this tradition, there is multiple avenues that you can go down. And finding the avenue that aligns with your level of consciousness. And of course, it is about growing your level of consciousness. And at first, especially from lower level conscious places, I don't even like to say lower level, but from certain conscious outlooks, there is something to gain, and a right and a wrong, and all of these type of things. And as we evolve up the ladder of consciousness, we realize that most of that is more like fashion and style. It's your personal fashion and style with reality that you're playing with. And that is not necessarily right or wrong for everyone. It's right and wrong for you. It's right and wrong for where you're at in your level of consciousness. And it's about honoring that, really. We're not trying to push someone into a worldview they don't want. We are really trying to honor right where they are and see the beauty in where they are, even if they can't see the beauty in where you are, because that's just part of this whole thing. So it gives us tools that, through which we can play with our reality and play with the way we view our reality and see how that changes things, see how that has an effect on things. The Inca were preoccupied with an energetic world. And in that energetic world that they were preoccupied with, they were actually more concerned with what flows of living energy or what spiritual experiences happened and how they aligned with this material world. They saw the spiritual or the energetic as primary and the material as secondary, not at all illusory, though. This reality was never an illusion to them. In fact, this reality is the mother of creation, and they pay the utmost respect to her because she's the one that gave us a place to be. We're living with mom. So, we give the biggest respect to her because she really is the one teaching us this time around. We couldn't live with father, son. It would burn us up. It would dry us out. It would destroy this physical vehicle that we have. So we have this awesome opportunity to get to know mom better. And that is this tradition in a nutshell, is getting to learn to know mom better and how to be like mom, how to be like the mother nature, how to be like Mother Earth, how to be like the cosmic mother. And, that hints at something unique in our tradition, which is that it is connected to a reemergence of the divine feminine, of the Holy Sophia into this world. And that's something that I don't always talk about or go into, but it's a very interesting quality, is to understand our material mother, our spiritual material mother, and how she has actually carved out a path for us to follow to become like her.
Mm. Yeah. So real quick, before I continue, I just want to pull up a couple of comments just to say hi to people. Brianna, hello, welcome. Tony Sierra says, Ayanchu Paqo Kuna. Ayanchu.
Tony.
Tom Shuck says, the fans are waiting. I'm not sure what that exactly means, but we're happy to have you here, Tom. So when you were talking about how back then they were in that culture, they were so fascinated and predominantly occupied with how the spiritual and energetic realities influence the physical reality, which are all seen as very legitimate and real realities. I have the same kind of view, and I have had before I encountered the Paqo Kuna tradition, but especially lately, I've been so fascinated with how interacting with the spiritual world, with interacting with the energetic world, can have such profound effects on us here physically. Like, for example, this happens to me often, but last night I was experiencing something. I had a lot of anxiety, anger, all of these things. I was even thinking thoughts toward my partner Eris that were totally not in alignment with how I normally think and feel. And it was really, really chaotic. And I caught it then in that moment. I was thinking some particularly nasty thoughts, and I just thought, oh, these aren't my thoughts. These aren't the way I normally think. Let me look into this and see if there's anything here. And I was able to identify that I had picked up a spiritual entity that was manipulating my own unhealed wounds and shadows. And we addressed that. We did the healing work to integrate and heal the entity, and then also to start to work on releasing some hucha surrounding these shadows and start to integrate things. And, the healing probably lasted 20 minutes, if that, or 30 minutes. And it was like I was a completely different person. I mean, especially in the way that I felt. Before it was such an intense anger, hot, tight, heavy, uncomfortable. I felt like I was going to have a panic attack, and I was also really angry. And then after just 20 minutes of working on the energetic and spiritual, I felt the lightest in my heart, the most peaceful, the happiest I had in quite a while. And and I see that all the time in the healings that I facilitate for other people. I could have people come to me that are like ready to give up on life. They're ready to like quit because things are so uncomfortable. And then, we do a healing session that maybe lasts about an hour long. And not only are they not ready to give up, but they're excited about life. They're ready to live. And it doesn't always work that way, of course. Mm-hmm. But in the instances where it does work out that way, it just fascinates me that interacting with the spiritual realm, like they're so intimately interwoven. They're inseparable. The spiritual realms and the physical realms, which in my view, the physical is a spiritual realm. But it's just so amazing that we have the ability to interact with that and create such powerful, tangible, real change for ourselves. And I this part of my passion is to help the people who come to me and who ask for it to realize just how much power they really have in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a wonderful thing, and that's part of our work and part of our life path. Of course, not everyone is called to be a healer. That doesn't mean that everyone doesn't have the potential or the ability to, on some level, heal. Just like not everyone feels called to be a teacher, but that doesn't mean that everyone doesn't have something to teach in this reality. But there are some people who embody these things more than others, and it becomes part of their own spiritual progression to be offering this type of service to others. And it is very powerful. And, a lot of people sometimes, especially in the spiritual realm, there's this misconception that this reality, this life, is an illusion.
Yeah.
And that's just a misconception that has come from the oversimplification of spiritual understandings.
Yes.
And it's really not that this reality is of any type of an illusion. It's that we have in this reality the ability to project our mental and emotional qualities onto the reality. It's one of the gifts humanity has. And because we can do that, we can make an illusion that we're living in that isn't true to the external reality. And this tradition is 100% about learning how to embrace reality on its terms, not ours. We are a co-creative power in this world, but we are not the creative power itself in this world. We were given a dispensation of power to create with. And, but that dispensation of power is not, doesn't have the capacity to translate to change in our lives until we embrace the reality around us. Just like if someone's an alcoholic, they cannot quit being an alcoholic by denying the fact that they have a problem with alcohol. That will never get them to that point. No matter how much they pray about it, no matter how much they gear their consciousness to believe that they are not that, it will not translate because they are fundamentally denying an aspect of reality. And that is one of the dangerous things with modern spirituality, is that there's a whole lot of denial going on, a whole lot of cherry picking of thoughts and feelings and things like that. Just like there's an idea that we have to destroy our internal monologue to step into a spiritual state. Now,
I've been there.
Yeah, absolutely. So have I. And there are moments where the internal monologue becomes quiet. There are moments in the spiritual experience, but more realistically, it's taking your awareness away from that monologue, because the analytical mind's job is to constantly be weighing everything. And for you to destroy that, or for you to find a way to actually completely obliterate that, you are either repressing or suppressing those thoughts and emotions. And 90% of the thoughts and emotions that we have never come to conscious awareness. They are filtered out before they reach conscious awareness, considered that they aren't useful for our functioning. At the high level, they just aren't useful. So when we start to realize that, we realize we can never control our mind, that our mind is not in our control, and that in fact, in its natural state, in its most holy and sacred state, is when there is no controls on the mind. The problem is the controls that we've tried to place on our thinking, on our emotions, that they dissociate us from ourselves. And as we dissociate more and more from ourselves, we actually start to weaken the amount of power we have in this world, because our power is based on the coherence between the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave. When we have a breakdown in that coherence, it creates a disruption pattern around us of energy. That disruption pattern can be quite beautiful, but it causes certain effects in our lives. It causes things to not go exactly the way we thought they might. Of course, the way we think something might go is not it does not determine how it does go. It's all about learning to fall into the grace of the moment. And that's something that Tony and I were talking about on SOAR, which is a program that we do every other week on Wednesday. And we were actually talking about some of these things this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I come across a lot of people who have this viewpoint of like not only everything is an illusion, but for example, like you're actually a projection of me. And any spiritual beings that I interact with, those are projections of myself as well. And like I said, not only is it an oversimplification, but I think in a way it's sort of a selfish viewpoint of reality. It's like everything revolves around me. I'm the middle of reality. Everything around me, spiritual beings, human beings, everything, it's all just me. It's a projection of me. And that seems like a very sort of egocentric, self-centered way of viewing reality. And it can be very limiting as well, because then I think people stop truly perceiving the beauty in the things that are different and separate from them. And I've been there when several years after, probably I don't know, a number of years after my initial awakening, where I call my first awakening was like when I realized that energy, spirit existed, all that stuff, and I had the ability to perceive it, interact with it, all that. And then I had an awakening to consciousness, becoming aware of the one consciousness. And so I had this practice for 2 years. That's all I did, was do nothing else but try and keep my mind clear and focus on consciousness and do nothing else. And I thought I was like, I had it figured out. This is it. This is the end game. As long as I keep doing this, it's all perfect. And I didn't realize just how much, like you were saying, I was suppressing. And same thing back then, it was like, yeah, everything is me. I am the one consciousness, and everything is a projection of me. And so I missed out on a lot of the beauty and interactions with spiritual beings, with other people, and all of this stuff. But I also was suppressing so much of my own experience. I was suppressing my emotions, my thoughts. And when I finally stopped doing that and had to face them, it was like, whoa, here's this backlog of 2 years worth of shit that I hadn't faced, and it was really uncomfortable to work through. And again, it's like, I couldn't see it. I thought that, because there are certain spiritual teachers, I won't name any, but certain teachers that I was following that made it sound like that was the ultimate goal, spiritually, on any spiritual path. Like it's the ultimate goal is to just empty your mind and be oneness.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are your thoughts on that in terms of the whole? Because in my experience, just as much as beautifully unique you are from me, and I am from my brother and my partner and everyone else, I experience reality the same way, in that like the spiritual beings I interact with are their own unique, beautiful beings as well. I don't see, and I don't really I don't understand why people would view that any differently. I guess I can kind of postulate, um if we are spiritual beings incarnate in physical bodies, and there are other spiritual beings that just don't have physical bodies, but they're just as much of a person and a unique being as we are. There's so many people are just, yeah, it's a projection of myself.
Well, that's safe. That's a safe way to feel in control of the experience, is to
Yeah.
believe it's just a projection of yourself. There's a beauty in the experience of the oneness. There is a beauty to that experience, but that is not the goal of life. That is not the goal of our personal moments in life. We can do that. We can merge with that, but we still have our individual life to live. We still have this moment here. And it also amazes me sometimes when of course, there's a power to positivity. There is a power to positive thinking. It can make you more resilient. That's what the power is. The biggest power in positive thinking is it can make you more resilient for when things don't go well.
Mhm.
That's really what it can do for you, because someone who focuses very negatively on reality oftentimes doesn't have the energy to deal with an issue when it comes up. They just give up. Where if you view the world a little more positively, you can weather storms a little bit easier. But to believe that you need to cut off pieces of yourself in order to be able to attain enlightenment, or especially to experience the oneness, that there's something that you should cut off of yourself so that you have an ability to experience oneness. That never made any sense to me, because if we're talking about the oneness, it has to be everything. And that means it has to be all the negativity in the world too. That means if you subtract negative thoughts or negative feelings from the wholeness, there is not the oneness anymore.
When you put it that way, it sounds so obvious and silly when you put it that way, to even,
Yeah, because you can't lob things off and become more whole. I can't cut pieces of myself off. I think it's a Bible verse that says, if your right hand offends, cut it off, But if you cut off your right hand, then you now have to go through life with a part of yourself disconnected. You have less power in the world. So it's not about cutting things off or denying things. It's not at all about that. It's about learning how to embrace those parts of ourselves and to use the energy stored within them. There are no junk emotions. There are no junk thoughts. Some of them help you move forward in life, and some of them hold you back a little bit. But you don't get to control what you think. That's just the quintessential part of consciousness, is that you are not in control of the mind. The mind is its own entity, and it has the right to think anything it wants at any time. What you have is the power not to lend energy to the thoughts and the creations of the mind. That's where your co-creative power comes into play, is that you can choose to not feed a thought form. If you choose not to feed a thought form, you reduce the amount of power it has in your life. That doesn't mean that you cause it to go away, or that it will never exist again, or that you'll never have a thought like that again. What you might end up doing is telling your consciousness, those thoughts just aren't so important for my processing, so you aren't aware of yourself thinking them. But if we want to look at thought, it is a never-ending smorgasbord that continues to just bring in brand new data. And its whole purpose, or one of its purposes, is radical creativity. And radical creativity doesn't care about positive or negative, good or evil, or any of that. What it cares about is novelty, is the transformation through time, and the movement of things through time, and how those things can become new iterations of themselves and spin back. Creativity doesn't care. It just doesn't care, and that's where the mind is connected, is to a font of creativity, And sure, some of our thoughts really depress us. Some of our thoughts scare us. But the real tool, or the real action we're learning, is how not to feed those thoughts. Not to damn ourselves for having them in the first place, or to think that we've lost some ground that we once had, but to allow them to move through us unencumbered. In shamanism, it's very true to kind of this idea that we are trying not to be attracted or repulsed by anything. That's what we're trying to develop, is the ability to not be attracted or repulsed by anything. That doesn't mean that on a real level we're not. It means that we're able to not allow that to control our actions. We're able to not feed it. Yeah, I'm attracted to this, but I can decide it's not important, even though I'm attracted to it. Oh, I'm repulsed by that, but I can decide it's not important that I'm repulsed by it. That doesn't matter, that I have a repulsion toward it. And by gearing our thoughts and our neurology in that way, we can allow everything to start to move through us. And when we get like that, the mind becomes like a breeze, and we don't have to control it anymore. We can just let it flow, because we realize that what we are is something else. We don't, just because we have a thought or a feeling doesn't mean we're broadcasting it into reality. That's another thing. Some people think that if they're having a thought, it's so important that it must be the truth of what they need to do, or the truth of what they have to do, or that they're just going to do it because they're thinking about it. And that's taking away your natural power. That's you saying you have no power in this world. That's your co-creative power, is to think this thing and not do it. Or
So many people become like paranoid. They develop a level of paranoia around the thoughts that they think, oh, if I allow this thought, this heavy or negative thought to come through, that it's going to like ruin my life and something terrible is going to come my way just for thinking it. And then, or on the, even outside of that, people feel shame, I shouldn't be thinking this. And then that adds shame on top of the thought that they already had. And then they feel that shame and that creates heaviness. And they feel guilty, and it just kind
yeah,
of compiles on top of it.
yeah, and those are unhealed wounds that
Yeah.
we are carrying around with us. The shame for thinking something, all of that is kind of unhealed wounds. Not the shame is unhealed. It's okay to be ashamed of something you did. It's okay to say, because that's you taking a responsibility. But shame and all these other things are within your power. That means you don't have to feed them if they're not going to be beneficial for you. Shame can be very beneficial. You can have done something out of feeling of out of unconsciousness. You could have been completely out of yourself, become completely reactionary, and treat someone really badly. And you might say, well, I'm ashamed of that, but I'm going to let that go because this or that reason, some philosophy. But maybe that shame is what's making it important. And what I mean by making it important is it's there to remind you. So next time you're observant during it. You don't go completely unconscious, because the shame has that power. You put it there, and you put it there to do a job. And if you allow it to, and if you can understand what job you assigned it, then you might start to feel a little bit of shame in real life moment when you start to go unconscious, and that might make you aware enough to not act in a reactionary way. But if we never own these things, if we never own them for the divine power they have, what we do is we put them off into a shadow realm. Then if I feel shame, I must have done something wrong. It must be something bad. Not that I have put a warning system in place for myself in the future. And that's something that people just don't always understand about these things. But these unhealed wounds, when they get triggered, they can bring up all kinds of emotions and all kinds of thoughts and feelings. And what we really want to do is be able to own it, because it is us. Those feelings, those thoughts, if we're having them on some level, they are us. And if we can own that and take power and decide, just because I think this doesn't mean it's real. Just because I feel this doesn't mean it's real. I try to tell everyone.
I think there's a paradox there, right? Because in my in my experience, and I don't think anybody has to agree with me, but in my own direct experience with reality, the imagination is the tool through which we perceive reality. And whether we like it or not, my experience is that when you tune into that consciousness, when you have those moments of really feeling the oneness of everything, you can feel in those moments that it's infinite, that there's no beginning or end to it. And reality is intimately interwoven with that. And so I can feel, because of that reality is also infinite, an infinite number of realities, infinite number of universes, so to speak. And so when we imagine something pops into the imagination, my experience with it is that we are tuning into something somewhere in the quantum field where that already exists for real and is happening. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to come through and completely change this version of reality that we're experiencing. But I do. So yeah, there's, like I said, it's kind of a paradox. In one way, yes, everything, how could there be an unreal reality? Something you're experiencing, you imagine, you feel, it's there, you're experiencing it. It's real. How could it not be real when you're experiencing it? Because you have to say that reality is not real. And even that sentence sounds ridiculous. But like I said, at the same time, it doesn't mean that every little bit of reality that you tune into with your imagination is going to completely change the course of this reality this timeline that you're experiencing right now.
Yeah, there's and a lot of this is theoretical and philosophical in nature,
Yeah.
But we can say that there are multiple realities, and we could see them as the worlds that are being created by the sleeping Vishnu. In Hinduism, Vishnu lays at the bottom of the ocean of consciousness, and out of the pores of his skin, these little bubbles are all are coming out and moving and growing and going in every way. And as long as Vishnu is asleep, all these material realities will continue to exist. But if Vishnu awakens, all these realities cease to exist at that moment. And so there's many different ways of viewing that. We've also called it dreaming. To become awake within the dream and then to become the dreamer of the dream. Once again, that's still a co-creative process. It's not, you don't take over the entire dream when you awaken within it, because that would ruin or violate the law of free will.
Yes.
And that would also destroy the power of synchronicity, because synchronicity works through the law of free will. That's what makes it so amazing, is that when a synchronicity happens to you, it means from the beginning of time, everything choosing its own way, going through life with a complete free will, aligned to make a synchronicity happen in your life, to make this chance occurrence pop up. And that's something that can only happen from that divine level. I think I've talked about this with a lot of people. I think they call it the Mandela effect. People who remember certain things that happened. Well, I remember in the 90s, Queen Elizabeth dying. Absolutely remember it on the news. I remember all kinds of stuff about it. I remember Dick Van Dyke dying around 1998. Dick Van Dyke's still alive, but I remember the specials on the memorial specials about his life, his struggles with alcoholism and all that. And I remember watching those things, but that's not the reality as I live in today. How do I get into this reality? I don't know. I don't know when I entered it. I won't know when I exit it, because that's the nature of these realities. Maybe it happened when I died in another reality, that my consciousness swam into this one. Maybe maybe that's what death is. Maybe that's what birth is. But these are all theoretical ideas, and as such, I don't put a whole lot of weight onto them. Because they create a model. And models are important for us to function. Humans need models to function in this reality. But in the end, it's about choosing and picking models that work for you in the moment, not necessarily becoming a fundamentalist to one model of reality.
Right.
So at one moment you might sit with me and I might talk a whole lot about parallel universes, and in another moment you might sit with me and I might see them from a much different perspective, which is, it doesn't matter if I believe in them or not. If that's your experience of it, then that's important, and that holds a medicine that needs it to be excavated. And so there's so many different ways that we can look at every moment.
Yeah. And that is one of the, like you said, one of the other things, are remove all those models, remove the ideas of that, and reality becomes this very kind of trippy experience. Imagine, like, for a moment, if you had just stepped into where you are right now with the things you're seeing, the room around you, the phone in front of you, the sounds coming into your ears, if you had no conception, no ideas about how any of this worked, no past knowledge of it, and you stepped right here into this moment, this would be like the most intense and wild psychedelic trip you've ever experienced. Just this moment that we're all in right here, right now. That's something I think about. That's something I think about that helps to kind of remind me of just how beautiful and special reality is. Because sometimes we can kind of view all this as kind of dull and boring. And I've been here a million times before, and I know what's going to happen, which is helpful. We need the mind to help us to navigate. Because if we truly all the time were just like, whoa, look at this trippy reality, we would never get anything done, and we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves and function. But at the same time, if we kind of
I don't think that's absolutely true. I think that the novelty of it would wear off quickly.
Yeah.
I really do, because we are adaptable beings. So I don't care. So I think that really you would start to make models out of whatever you're experiencing.
Oh yeah, I agree.
There's no way that we can stand outside of that. Even someone with their head blown wide open on psychedelics, that they're not. That's one thing that I really don't talk about a lot. But psychedelics are not necessarily a spiritual experience.
Mm.
We in the West think, oh, psychedelics, that's like this shortcut. That's the bullet, the quick bullet straight into the spiritual experience. And it's really not. It's just it's a state of confusion. It means that you're getting information in a different way. Your brain is functioning in a different way and digesting that information differently. But that doesn't mean that it's more divine or more sacred of a way of seeing reality. It just really isn't. It's just a filter that we're putting over our consciousness. And when we remove all those filters, we start to see life in a whole different way. And it can be very intense and it can be very dull at the same exact time. But really, that whole I've been here, I've done that, that's actually more about a damaged hippocampus than anything else. That is something that happens to us from having entered way too many anxious-ridden states over and over again, or way too many fear-inducing states, traumas. That creates a level of cortisol, a release of cortisol into our system. Now, cortisol has a very important role. It's to make you become active and be able to react to danger of some type, to fight or flight. But what happens is if we continue to have these experiences over and over again, our body gets addicted to the cortisol and adrenaline release. As that happens, it floods the brain, and there's one area of the brain that has the most cortisol receptors, that's the hippocampus. And when those receptors are just bombarded by cortisol over and over again, there is an experience that happens to us, and is actually a type of brain damage where we quit seeing opportunity in our world and we start to envision or await the next shoe to drop. We always think something bad's about to happen instead of something good's about to happen. And that's actually created by an addiction to the cortisol, addiction to stress hormones. And that also pushes us up into a beta wave state of mind. Yeah. And the beta wave state of mind, which is a beautiful state to be in when we're using it in a responsible way. When you're learning something brand new, you go into beta. When you're in danger, you go into high beta. And it makes you focus more on your body, more on your finances, more on the concrete parts of reality. And that damaged hippocampus then starts to tell us that the only things that matter is our physical body, is what we have or don't have, is the material in our lives. So as we start to heal that hippocampus, and we do that through ceremony, we do that through nutrition, getting a lot of omega-3 fatty acids will help us to start to repair that, and also reducing the amount of sugar that we get, including grains. Because grains turn into sugars in our system and they create a constant sugar rush. And what is a sugar rush does, it makes you feel really good. Then when you're at the other end of it, you feel hungry, you think you're starving. It makes your body go back into a fear mentality. It makes it go back into stress, saying, oh, I don't have enough. I don't, and it brings you right back into beta wave thinking, and you start to become more particle than wave, more physical than spiritual once again, and it becomes a cycle. So it's really about correcting these things in our diet, especially, has a humongous impact on the way that we are able to accept reality. Honestly, we can get to a place where we're really just not so much bored with reality anymore. We can become tired. We can become worn out about something, but we don't really get bored about it anymore because boredom is actually a symptom of these sugar rushes, these extreme states of mind going on over and over again. After you're up and you're down and you're up and you're down and you're up and you're down, eventually you don't care when you're up and you don't care when you're down.
Mhm.
Both just are exhausting you, and you know that on some level. And so everything just becomes this drudgery, this exhaustion. Why do I have to go through it? There, I've been there, I've done that. Oh, yeah, this opportunity is not an opportunity. It's just something else trying to sucker me in, or another, we become that way of thinking. When we become that and we do that for a long enough time, that becomes a personality trait. At first, it's just a mood. I'm bored, I'm sad, I'm depressed. Eventually, it becomes a personality trait. When it becomes a personality trait, you're broadcasting it out into the reality, and you're saying, this is what I see reality as. So reality is going to bring you more and more experiences that reinforce that view. The
Mhm.
people around you are going to read that energy coming off of you, and they're going to treat you more and more like that, because that's what your energy's saying. Been there, done that. That nothing special. No one wants to be around the guy who says nothing's special, nothing's meaningful, there is no purpose.
Yeah.
Everyone. So people start to react certain ways back toward you, and that's part of our divine power, is to learn to take deliberate control of those things. When we learn to take deliberate control of those things, we can actually start to hack our reality.
Mhm.
And it's not, once again, we're not the ultimate creator of the reality. It's within a field of free will. Everyone's free will helps to manifest the reality that we live in. And so, but we can take control of our little piece of it. And when we take control of our little piece of it, we can start to transform our world for the better.
Yeah, and so I want to jump back real quick to
Mhm.
something you were saying earlier, and then remind me if I forget. I have a question about the sugar
Mhm.
and grains. So,
Yeah.
um, well, the first thing I was going to say is a little while back we were talking about getting addicted to cortisol, getting addicted to those experiences, and that's been my biggest challenge in life is navigating anxiety. And it was times in my life where I was almost constantly in a high state of anxiety unless I drank a bunch of alcohol, and then I would feel some temporary relief and then feel far worse and have to drink more. And it was this very vicious cycle. And it was actually you working with you, and you had kind of sat me down one time, and you're like, listen, the next time one of these anxiety attacks comes up, you need to just sit with it and like allow it. It's not going to kill you. I know it wants you to believe that it's going to kill you, but it's not. And if you sit there and you feel it and you allow, and don't run away from it, it's going to pass. And I realized, like, I had never before, like up until that point, I had never actually allowed the anxiety to just run its course. I'd always done something about it in terms of taking substances or something.
Mhm.
And so I remember the first time I followed your advice and I sat down, and it was really intense. It was terrifying. I was so scared. I didn't know what was going to happen because it was a totally new experience, but I allowed it to come through, and then it did. And then it passed and I felt good. And it was like this giant light bulb went off moment of like, oh, wow. I'm like, when I have anxiety, it doesn't mean I'm going to be stuck there forever until I do something about it. Like emotions can just pass through if I allow them to. And so
Mhm.
that really changed the course of my life in such a big way. And so now, and when anxiety does arise for me, I almost kind of look forward to it as a learning experience to get to know myself better and to also gain a little bit more self mastery. So like, anxiety will arise, and I just kind of surrender. I let go. I allow myself to fully feel it. I give it my full loving attention, and I allow it to run its course to move through. And then after it does, almost always I feel better after the anxiety than I did before I had it. Now, I
Yeah.
will say though, talking to that point, this happened about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I had a couple days where it was like several bouts of anxiety that I navigated through. And I was, navigated through them and felt good, navigated through, felt good. And then I woke up the day after all that had happened, and I just felt very peaceful. And I'm laying there and I'm like, this is kind of boring. But I almost thought, like, I kind of want to have one of those experiences again so I can navigate through it because it's so intense. And I realized in that moment, I'm like, oh wow, those experiences can be very addictive.
They
Even when you're
are.
not suppressing, even when you're navigating through them and giving them the
Yeah.
attention, like that cortisol is very addictive. So I totally can attest to that.
Yeah, any state that you allow yourself to be in over and over again, they all of our states of being create a cascade of certain chemicals within us. Peptides, neuropeptides, and neurotransmitters, and hormones are released as well. And these are to communicate with the body about what's going on. And any of those things can become addictive if we get used to that. That's why someone even you might think of how to put it. Wait a second. So everything's going right in someone's life who feels anxiety or depression a lot, and they will start to feel uncomfortable in life because they're not having anxiety or depression. And that's their body saying, I'm not getting this fixed. And then the body and the mind are going to work together to manifest in your reality, or at least the way you're seeing reality, the experience that will bring you that fix, that biochemical fix, because your body has gotten used to it. And without it, the body doesn't feel like it's in equilibrium. And so that's a very beautiful thing, though, that you were talking about, because it is about sitting with it. When we sit with these things, we take the power back from them. We start, because we have invested power in them. And the longer we fight them, the longer we try to change them and just force them into what we want them to be, the longer they stick around. Because if you're fighting with a part of yourself, number one, it's still a part of you. It's still coming through a part of yourself. That means part of your vital life force is stored within it. And pushing it off to someplace else is paramount to a soul fracture.
Yeah.
It's paramount to leaking energy. You're leaking energy because you don't want to pay attention to it. What else happens when we leak energy? We create an open window in our spiritual field. Now things can get in that are attracted to the form of energy we're leaking out. So we can actually attract spiritual entities into us. And we might say, oh, no, I didn't give it permission. Well, it is permission if you leave a window open.
Yeah.
If you leave a door open, you have just given permission to anything that could walk through that door. And if you are at the same time feeding an energy, whatever that energy is out there, you're attracting things that like that form of energy. So instead, if you would just feed on your own energy, even if it's anxiety or depression or sadness, and that's another thing, we really generalize these things. We say, oh, you're never supposed to feel anxiety. Oh, you're never supposed to feel sadness or anything like that. But honestly, we are. We were made to feel a smorgasbord of feelings. If the problem is when they don't shift within an hour, that means that there's something wrong. They're an emotion. And all emotions, I don't care if it's glorious love, is dangerous and toxic to the individual. Feelings are the spice of life. Feelings make us give us more energy. But emotions, all of them drain energy from us because they're filled with emotion. They're filled with story. They're filled with a story of how things must be, an expectation of how things must be. And it takes a lot of energy to keep thinking one way or to keep a flow of energy in that way. Even if you're seriously in love with someone, you're not sitting there at every moment of the day thinking about how you're seriously in love with them. That's just not reality. I mean, and that's just not balanced to be there, because then you are purposefully making a part of your consciousness just keep devoting energy over to this feeling, and to make it real, to make it something that we have. And that comes down to a lot of the way that the West was trained or sees reality came from Rome, not from Greece, but from Rome. And Rome is where passion comes from, where the idea of impassionate, the Roman idea of love is it's something that happens to you that you have no control over. Anger is something that happens to you that you have no control over. Sadness is something that happens to you, where these things are all powers that we can control. There are times in our life that the right medicine or the right way of approaching a situation is sadness. If someone close to you has died, it is completely appropriate to feel sad and to approach life from the feeling of sadness. Yeah,
And if you don't allow yourself to experience that, and like, for example, the idea of grief, I have found in my, for me, I mean, I've had tragic things happen to me, like all of us have, where I've lost people very, very close to me. And back when I was more emotionally shut down, I didn't allow myself to experience that grief that naturally was supposed to come through and be experienced. And I shoved it down inside, didn't allow myself to cry and experience all of that. And years down the road, it would manifest as like panic attacks and all kinds of other things. There was all that energy of that grief, that power inside of me that wasn't expressed the way it was meant to be. It comes up in some other form later. And when my cat Fiona, she's been with our family. You know, she lives with my brother and I. She's been with the family for like, you know, she was like 13 or 14 or something like that. And she just recently passed away. And I remember I kind of had a talk with myself of like, hey, you need to allow yourself to really feel all of this grief. You need to cry as much as you need to cry. Like, you need to really allow this. And yes, in the moment, like, it can be painful to feel that much grief. It can be painful to lose someone and cry and all that. But I found it was so much better to allow myself to feel that pain and to cry and feel all that grief than to try and not let it out, to try and shove it somewhere else, like you put it.
Yeah.
I'm so happy, like in retrospect, I'm so happy that I allowed myself to cry so much and feel so much grief and not try and say, oh, no, you know, because, you know, there's even previous words that have been like, oh, she's still alive in spirit and like, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with this. And I really allow myself to feel all that grief. And you know, I feel so much better for it.
Yeah, it's so important to allow yourself to feel your feelings, but you also have control over your feelings, and to remember that, remember that they're allowed to pass as well, and that it isn't, you know, especially with grief, people oftentimes will feel ashamed or feel sad or feel scared the moment that they are not grieving anymore. You know, when they pop out for a minute and they had a good experience, or they had a happy thought or something, and then they're like, well, what's that mean? Does that mean I love this person less? Does that mean any of these things? And it doesn't, because in our natural state, and grief is not our natural state. It's something that happened that we have to work through and deal with. It is natural, of course, but it's not our natural state of being where we bounce back and forth through emotions. It takes a while when something like that has altered your consciousness in your life. It takes a while to repair. I don't even want to call it repair. It takes a while to grow, because every time we lose someone or something, we're growing at that moment. We're growing in our love. We're growing in the idea that they are now in a different form, and that our communications with them will be very different from that moment forward. You know, and that is a realization that takes time. Now, if it's been 2 or 3 years and you still are just 100% in the depths of sadness and grief over the passing of someone, doesn't mean that you don't feel sadness from time to time. But if you're still deep in it, then there is a problem there. There's something, most likely you need a little bit of help getting through. If it's been 2 or 3 years and you're still feeling the grief like day one.
Yeah. And I love that. I always love when you talk about this, about how the difference between feelings and emotions, how feelings are, and I say that I've said this, I don't even know if I've heard you say that before, the feelings are the spice of life. I actually made a reel talking about that, how, like, you know, if we didn't have feelings and then there was no emotion to feel around all of this stuff, you know, you get a new promotion, it's just flat and dull and dry. There's no happiness or excitement or anything, or something happens that would create grief, and your same thing, you're just flat, no emotions at all the whole time. Reality would be so dull and tasteless. But the spices of feelings, everything really comes alive in this beautiful way. Everything has a different flavor to it, and it's just so beautiful to me. But I love what you say about it.
We get addicted to certain emotions and we play favorites. We say, oh, I like this one. And I want this one to be the primary emotion that I feel all the time. And that puts a lot of stress on your system, because now your consciousness is filtering out everything that doesn't fit in with your model. And eventually the flood, the wall that's behind, or that the amount of emotion or feelings that is behind this wall that is separating you from it will eventually fill up, and it will spill over the top of it. And then it's very harsh to deal with because we don't know what it's about anymore. We don't know what the sadness is. We don't know what the anger is anymore. And it's very easy for us to just throw it on anything. In those moments, because we're like, oh, I feel this. It must be you. You've got to be doing this. You're irking me. And that's really living from a disempowered place. You know, we really want to be able to feel those things and still be kind and still be in control of ourselves. You know, even if we are feeling very sad. Of course, if we're feeling very sad, there's no problem with having a frown or just having that energy around you right then. But you have to be open to any other energy coming in, because most of these things, I mean, really, it is true. They pass usually in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, if you start to notice and become aware of yourself, you'll notice that you can get really sad for 10 or 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden you're really happy. And then all of a sudden everything is just really even keel. And, you know, you can just, if you just look at it, you realize there's no problem in feeling any of these things. It's all, we just deem certain ones good and deem certain ones bad. And as we were talking about earlier, that has created a type of bypassing that's in the spiritual world, where people are like, oh, you got to feel positive 100% of the time. You can't even entertain one negative thought, or it's going to damn you. It's going to crush you. It's going to destroy your life. And I attest that I have manifested beautiful and wonderful experiences for myself and done it from a negative point of view.
Yeah, I believe it. So again, I love when you talk about this, and it's something that I become so in love with myself and passionate about, is like that experience, and it's my experience too, that feelings, you know, shift about less than 20 minutes or less, you know. And so, you know, because I used to, like, you know, I used to get stuck in anxiety. It was my primary one for, you know, months or weeks at a time. And now to allow, and one of the things I find too, a mechanism behind what happens, at least to really simplify it in a way, is that it feels like certain emotions come through, we don't like them, they're uncomfortable to us, and then we sort of contract around them, whether it's in our heart or just our energy field in general. So like anxiety comes up, I'm afraid of it, I don't like it, so my heart contracts around it, and then all this dense energy is kind of accumulated around it, and now the natural flow of that energy of that emotion, which would just kind of flow through and then shift states into another state, is now stuck in that contracted energy in my heart, where it just continues to like bombard against all of that contracted energy, and it grows and gets more and more and more intense. So for me, like really learning how to be present, relax, and open up, like release that contraction surrounding the emotion, I do find that they can shift just so quickly. And even I've had experiences where I felt like a panic attack about to start, and as soon as I notice it, I just completely relax my heart, relax my Paqo, my energy field, completely relax it, open everything up, and it passes within like 5 seconds. And it's not always like that, but I have had that happen before.
Absolutely, because you're allowing the flow to happen again, because the emotion is a flow. And when we feel something or we think something and it really disturbs us, what we tend to do, like you said, is contract. Or what I would say is we try to protect ourselves. We try to shield ourselves, and our energy field becomes an energetic prison, an energetic jail cell. Now, we might not be receiving any more of that energy into us, but the energy that we already felt, the emotion or the thought we already had, is trapped within us. It can't move out of us. And in this way, it creates a gravity well. And that gravity well attracts more heaviness toward it, more of the same toward it. So we start to pull into ourselves more. But now we have sealed our entire energy field off, and it's a shield. So instead of these new hooches or heaviness just moving through us as well, what we end up doing is we start to feel a lot of pressure. And that pressure is all that weight pushing down on our energy field. It makes us feel like we're being pushed in on. And as that weight becomes more and more strong, we start to go more and more unconscious because we're trying not to feel it and become more and more reactionary. But if we can speed the movement of that living energy, remember, everything in reality is living energy. And there is no good or bad when we look at it that way. It's not, well, I guess we could qualify things as good or bad, but there's not good or evil. There is no quality of evil at play there. There is no quality of negativity at play there. It's all just living energy, and all living energy must be positive because all of it is part of the continuum that allows existence to be, that allows us to have this moment. We live in a balanced dualism. We don't live in a balanced oneism. We live in a balanced dualism. That is the engine that creates the energy that allows material reality to be manifested, is the dualistic nature. And it's not something bad. It's not something negative.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and when we learn to actually get into it, we can learn to use our polarities as healing. We can learn to heal our lives and transform our lives through our polarities instead of trying to wish them away and just try to get on the bandwagon of this one concept of unity consciousness. If unity consciousness is, it always is, even in the separation. And that means that the separation is part of unity. And of course, that's a paradox, but that's what we are learning to deal with, because life is paradoxical. So we're learning to deal with those things, and we can put them into our mind and deal with them there and just crunch it back and forth. And that doesn't really work. That doesn't bring us anything, because a mind can't change a mind. There's no power in a mind to change a mind. There's more power in a emotion to change an emotion, but even that is pretty futile, because the mind and the emotions are two sides of the same coin. They play off of each other. What you feel, what your emotions make you think certain things, your thoughts make you have certain emotions, and they just play back and forth on each other. So we have to go further down and further up in layers of abstraction to change that. That's why reframing, powerful tool in the moment. In the moment, if I'm stuck and I can't do something because I'm having a limited belief, I can reframe that limiting belief, and I can then make an action, and I can get something done right now. But the thing is, that limiting belief is not gone. With the original cause that created that limiting belief is not gone. And eventually your mind gets wise to it, just like it gets wise to an organ transplant, and it says, this isn't me. This reframe is not really me. So though there is a lot of power in reframing, we really want to go beyond the mind and beyond the emotions to heal the mind and the emotions. We want to go up to the level of the soul, or up to the level of the spirit. Yeah, and it's kind of like that. We have feelings on the bottom level. We have emotions in between there. Then we have the mental level. Then we have the soul level. And then we have the spiritual level. So what we want to do to change the way, if we really want to improve the way we our emotions and our mind, well, the way we do that is by going higher and lower in abstraction, not by trying to change it on the level that is causing us the issue. That will never work. We have to go above that level and below that level. That's where the change happens. And one of the ways that we go below that level is to behave, even if I'm feeling sad, not to fake that I'm feeling happy, but even if I'm feeling sad, not to allow it to color my reality so much that I'm paralyzed.
Yeah.
To feel it, but not be paralyzed by it, and still to be able to enjoy good times with others, even in my sadness. And that's another thing it's just like weather. Some people are Seattle, Washington gets a whole lot of rainfall. And we can see rainfall as the same thing as producing tears and crying and feeling all those emotions, even the happy emotions that make us produce tears. We can feel all that. Maybe we're like Seattle, some of us. And that is a primary way that we experience reality. And we don't want to judge that because Seattle's beautiful. And there's a reason to go to Seattle or Oregon. And then maybe you're a desert, and in a desert, you just don't, there's a different mode there. Every human is like that. Every human has his own weather patterns. And if we look at feelings, not emotions are more stuck. But if we look at feelings, it's just weather. Mm-hmm. And we don't really think that it's any more important than weather. Weather's important, but it doesn't mean that the world is cursed if it's raining today.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you're receiving a great blessing if it's sunny today. If we can get into that state where we can observe what is and acknowledge it on that level and not feed it all these stories and ideas, we can free ourselves in a very real way to start to drive our neurology, to start to drive our emotions. Because we can use certain emotions. We can create our emotional states under our will. When we can do it under our will and it doesn't control us, then we can use emotional states as ways of driving ourselves. Maybe I don't have enough energy to finish this project. And I know that if I bring up the emotion of anger and if I manifest anger, I can suddenly have a boost of energy. So I can do that responsibly within myself and drive it that way. But I have to be consciously aware that that's what I'm doing and not allow it to start driving me.
I want to talk more about this, what you're talking about right now. But first, I want to step back in our conversation a little bit.
Sure.
You were talking about how, like when we were talking about how emotions, cause us to shield. And then like you were saying, that the energy compacts in there, and then hucha and all of these other things start to press down, and it causes this pressure that makes us really uncomfortable and all of that. So in some circumstances, I've practiced a lot, and I've developed a good amount of skill at releasing those contractions, releasing that shielding and allowing things to move through. But one of the in certain circumstances, in social settings in particular, like if I'm around a lot of people in a social setting somewhere, like out to eat, or like even at the kava bar, somewhere like that, I find that sometimes I'm aware that that's happening, that I contract and this anxiety is stuck and everything else is compacting around it. It's acting as a gravity well and all these things. I know what's happening, and I'm sitting there and I'm attempting to relax and to allow it to move through, even using tools like try the Simon Chikui, try to just open up the heart, try Hujamikwi, all of this stuff. And sometimes no matter what I do, that contraction won't release, and it just continues to compound and compound and compound until I can find solitude and work on it by myself. What do you have to, what advice would you give to someone who feels that way? Like they know what's going on, they're aware of all this, but for whatever reason, for some reason, they just can't affect it. They can't get it to move and change.
Well, I would say they're not listening to themselves. That they're receiving information that is coming from the experience of being where they're at. And some part of themselves is saying, I don't enjoy this.
Yeah.
And instead of honoring that and saying, I just really don't enjoy this activity. I really don't enjoy being around these people. I really don't enjoy being right here, right now. Instead of honoring that, or it may not even be the people or anything like that. It might be that you are forcing yourself out of your comfort zone for no reason other than to force yourself out of your comfort zone. And your higher genius is telling you, why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you putting yourself in this situation? And I think that would probably solve most of those issues for people, is that and also though social circumstances cause our energy field to become closer to our body. It's a protective measure because we are open to everyone else's energy. And that means that if you're sitting in a bar, every person that's walking around that bar, you are open to the energy that they are putting off. Yeah. That's how we work. And some people's energy is not compatible with your energy right now. It doesn't mean they're good or bad. It doesn't mean that they're an evil person. It means that your energy vibration and their energy vibration just are not compatible and should not be made to be in close proximity to one another. I always say it sometimes like the liver shakes. And I think we all have had that before. We're sitting maybe in your car or something, and someone walks by the car. And for some reason, and you don't know what it is, your entire body quakes. You just get a, and you have no idea what it is, but you know it has something to do. You know that it corresponded with that person walking past you. And I tend to believe that that is because you and that person are not in a proper alignment or harmony with one another. And you're not supposed to be, obviously. And it's your body telling you that. Your body's telling you, I'm not in a harmonious situation here. It's just like fire and water. We can find ways to harmonize fire and water. We can boil water. We can put fire out with water. But when those two things come into contact with each other, there is a violence. There is an explosion that happens. And spiritual teachers and stuff sometimes ignore that. They're like, oh, it's all love and light. It's all love and light. And that means it's all going to just be a big party and everything's going to go around well. No, even two spirits of love and light can be polar opposites to each other and shouldn't be in the same space at the same time because they'll create a discordant energy. This is also true of healing. People go to healers and readers way more often than they should. You go to someone and you ask for a reading from that person. Well, then you experience that reading and now apply it to every aspect of your life for at least the next month. Don't go to any other reader for that. Don't go anywhere else. Just because that's the only way you're going to know if what you received is true or not, is to integrate it. And healing the same way. People come to me for a healing, and when I'm done, I'll tell them, don't go to anyone else for a healing for a month. And I'll give them homework. Do this homework. If you don't do that homework or you go to someone else within a month, I won't work with you again. And there's good reason for that. So I might work with you and I might put this, and you might be dealing with something where you feel really insecure in life and you have just no lust for life anymore because everything feels so frightening to you. And while you're working with me and I'm doing my stuff, I might wrap the spirit of a serpent around you because the serpent is life force energy. It is that drive to live and everything. Now, that's going to take some time to integrate in you. It doesn't always happen immediately. Oftentimes it doesn't happen immediately. Now you go out and you might be feeling a little bit better, but you're like, man, I'm still just feeling insecure in my life. I feel, and it's just draining my life force and I'm just not. And so 3 days later, you go to another healer. And you tell them and you sit down with them and everything, and they're working on you. And all of a sudden they see that you are wrapped up with a big anaconda all around you. Now, what's that healer going to think? They're going to think this anaconda is either some type of curse or it's some type of demon that is squeezing the life out of you because they don't know what the other person put on you. Right. So you're going to experience it a certain way, and they're going to say, well, I know what I got to do for you. I got to unwrap this anaconda from you, and now you'll feel better. And you leave, and you feel a little bit better, but, a couple of days later, you decide, I got to go to this other healer, because I'm just not feeling where I'm supposed to be yet. I should be feeling better than this by now. But what's going on is every time you go to another healer, they're undoing the work the previous healer did because they can't know what that work is. And they can't believe that it's going to be the same work they're doing. You can't believe that. And even two spirits of the light may not get along with one another. And that's just reality. That's the way things are. And we have to, that's why you shouldn't just jump around from place to place like that. You have to give these things time to manifest in your life. And that time can take over a month. But within a month, you start to notice things. You start to see a pattern of change because you've gone through a moon cycle. You're aligning it with the flows of nature. And that's something people just don't like to do in our culture. We are such an instant gratification
Yeah.
culture that we think if it doesn't happen to us right now like that, it's not real. I got to go somewhere else. And it doesn't happen like that. I got to go somewhere else. And oftentimes, all you're really doing is wasting and entirely too much money on something that you're just trying to avoid in your life.
Mhm.
It takes a while to integrate. It takes a while, and no one knows how long. Your healers don't know how long it's going to take you to integrate because it has to come down. We do our work on the spiritual and on the soul level, and it has to filter down. And it can already be changing things in your life, but it takes a while for it to get into the mental level. It takes a while for it to get into the emotional level. And that's unique to every person.
Mhm. I want to pull these up. We got Mary's here. Mary's watching the stream.
Cool.
Says, when I feel compacted and stuck, but also aware of what is happening to me, I used to struggle with that for days. But now when my awareness comes in, I just tell myself that it's okay for me to feel the way I do, remind myself that life moves in waves and the feelings are temporary. I'm reminding myself that I am safe is a big help. And then just dropping in and using the word release has helped me. Really just reminding myself that it is okay to feel what I am, reminding myself that I am safe, working with the amazing control of my mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't say it better. You summed it up so perfectly there, Mary. I mean, that's really what it is. It's really just allowing yourself uh, to experience what is happening to you and understanding that it is your experience. And don't you want your experience? Don't you want to drink in the nectar of that experience so that you have it, so that you can apply it in your life? And there is no junk emotions, there's no junk feelings. We feel all these things for reasons. And and we will never know what those reasons are if we don't allow ourselves to experience it. But Mary, that was beautiful. I couldn't have said
Thank
it.
you, Mary. Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you for tuning in too. We'd love to have you here. Um, yeah, something I was going to say, completely flew out of my mind. But with in terms of emotions like this and allowing them to pass through, and like I said, that's just been such a pivotal thing that I just wish that we were taught this from a young age. And I do foresee a world where someday we kind of are taught about this stuff because we have all these emotions, we have all these experiences. Every human being on the planet experiences the full range of emotions, but no one is taught, like you said earlier, that we have power to shift the way that we feel. We have the power to manufacture emotions like that. That is so game changing. And when people learn that, like when I learned that, it really changed things for me. And I remember I was playing around with it using the power of memory, which I think you put it that way before, where at one point I was feeling some way. And then I decided, you know what? It would be really nice to feel gratitude right now. And so I sat there and I remembered a time that I felt a lot of gratitude. Remembered a scene and where I was and what it looked like and how I was feeling. And I felt so grateful. And using the power of my memory, it brought that gratitude here into the present moment. And I was truly feeling grateful. So then I started to play with this where I was like, okay, well, can I manufacture anxiety? So I think of a state that is very anxiety inducing, creates anxiety. Can I manufacture love? Think of a time where I felt a lot of love, and I found that pretty much any emotion that I was aware of that I remembered, I could manufacture that just using the power of my thoughts. And that's so powerful because it shows us the intimate relationship between our thoughts, our visualizations, our imagination, and the emotional sensations we feel in our bodies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because so many people are just kind of, oh, okay, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety or sadness or grief right now. Like, yeah, that's just the way it is. This sucks, and not realizing like the relationship between the thoughts and the emotions, and that you can step in and shift that if it's been sticking around to the point where it's causing you problems and coloring your view of reality in a way that's not beneficial for you.
Yeah, it's all about getting to know yourself. Really, I mean, just like I really stress that you dial these things in for you.
Yeah.
Some people have a more of a wet gratitude. It's like, oh, I feel so grateful. And some people have a gratitude that's, I feel grateful.
Mhm.
And both are okay. Both are true gratitude. It's really about dialing in what's right for you, what's functional for you. How do you feel love? And love is not felt the same by everyone. Excitement is not felt the same by everyone. These things are unique to each of us, and for us to find our unique vibration of each one.
Mhm.
We talk a lot in spirituality about dialing in like an elevated emotion, but that elevated emotion can be something totally different. For some people, the elevated emotion is kind of just feeling like everything is just kind of slightly dull and slightly just peaceful. And for someone else, an elevated emotion is feeling like, oh my gosh, I feel so wonderful. For
Mhm.
me, that's not really how I feel. That's not
Yeah.
really how I express that. That's not how I experience it. That would be anxiety to me. That
I
that is an anxious feeling to me. But an elevated emotion can feel so different for every person, and we have to dial these things in for ourselves and put a not put an expectation of what that must mean, what that must be to feel this way.
You
Possibly.
bringing that up to me the other day just gave me so much insight into so many relationships in my life. Particularly with me and Eris. Like Eris, like you said, is a very wet kind of gut. When her highest, she loves to feel excited and like, whoa, and this is amazing. She's kind of really up. And for me, like when I feel really good, it's just kind of a soft, like everything's very peaceful and calm, and that feels so supremely divine to me. But for her, she almost feels bad when she feels that way because of certain things that happened to her in the past, and she was really cut off from her emotions before. And she's learned a lot from that too, and that she learned that she had trauma that like caused her to want to be in extremes of emotion, because if she felt flat, it meant she was dull and cut off and was shut down. And so
Mhm.
it's just like, wow, like thinking about that, really thinking about how does this play into the different relationships in my life and how I experience emotions my own unique way, and what feels really good to me doesn't feel good to another person. That is so beautiful, I'm so glad we're talking about it here, because I
Well,
really think like, even if just one person hears that and realizes like, oh wow, that really helps me to understand myself and others. So that's it can be potentially life changing for a person.
yeah, it's just like the concept of hucha that we work with. We don't qualify things as evil or bad in our tradition. We qualify them as hucha because they make us feel heavy. But what hucha is unique to each person. What is hucha to you may not be hucha to me at all,
Mhm.
vice versa. And that sometimes can be hard for people to understand, because they think, oh, it must be that quality must be a constant in reality. This must always be hucha for every single person, and it's
Mhm.
not. Just like even though hucha can cause illness, there are people who function on hucha and they create great and beautiful things from the experiences of hucha, and that those experiences are their guiding light through life. And so it's a unique position to be in, because even though accumulations of hucha can cause illness and problems in our lives, hucha itself isn't that.
Mhm.
Just because you feel hucha doesn't mean you're going to have problems in your life, because hucha's food and we learn to eat it. And some people have a natural ability to eat hucha and they search it out. And some people need a pressure pushing down on them so that they produce something in this world. And that's how they drive themselves in this world. And as long as they use it that way and it's pushing down and then they drive it, as long as they make the flow happen, they can stay in a pretty healthy state. It's when you feel that pressure coming down and you're not allowing an expression of any type, you're not allowing it to push forward an expression or a manifestation in this world, that's when it becomes illness. We were created to create hucha. Our tradition says humans' job is to create hucha, because hucha is how we communicate with the mother, is how we have a relationship with Pachamama, is through our hucha, not through our sami. Through our hucha is how we develop that relationship. And it is through that relationship that we learn Aini. And it is through Aini that we increase our personal power. And it is through our personal power that we are able to manifest anything into our reality.
Mhm. Yes, yes. I love all this so much. Yeah, I've actually played with that with some of my students. You gave this example of one of your teachers. Um, uh, their teacher brought them out to a lake and had them swim out to the middle of the lake and hold their breath underwater. And so they told the student, okay, I'm going to send you a particular energy. I want you to just drink it in and then come up for air and then tell me what it felt like to you. And then they sent this energy. Then the students under the water drinking in, they come up and they go, oh, master, it was such a sweet, beautiful, divine, that's the most beautiful, euphoric light energy I've ever felt. And the teacher goes, oh, that's interesting because I was sending you my hucha, my heaviness.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and so I've actually played with this with people, like intuitively figuring out how he did that just based on what he did. And I've done it where I've experienced it. I've sent straight up hoocha, my uncomfortable happiness to someone, and they're like, "Wow, this feels so light and good." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that was my hoocha I was sent." And I use that as a teaching point, exactly what you're saying of what is hoocha for one person isn't hoocha for another person, and
Yeah,
it's all relevant.
it's so unique, and Hooch has more to teach us about ourselves than it has to teach us about the world, its outside world. Hooch has more to do with our inner world
Yeah.
and how we experience things. Um, and Hooch is a very powerful energy. It's a very beautiful energy that has a role. There is no junk. Though it can make us sick, we were created to manufacture it. And manufacturing it is part of the divine power of the human. Because we have the ability to manufacture Hucha, it shows us something that's unique about the human. And that is through our intention, our imaginations, and our visualizations, we have the power to drive the living spiritual energies of the universe. We have the power to slow them down, and we have the power to speed them up. And because of that, we have the power to create more harmony and beauty in the world around us. And it becomes our responsibility to become the beauty walkers, to become the beautifiers of reality, because we learn that we have this ability. And that ability isn't just about producing all the Sami in the universe, because we need Hucha too, and Hucha has a role in it all. And that's very important for people to understand, that there is a purpose to it all. Nothing in this universe is meaningless. And that's one of the biggest issues that we have going on in reality. Because of the scientific reductionist view of reality, that everything is mechanical and everything is just happenstance of chance occurrence of things bouncing into each other, that has removed all purpose and all meaning from life. It gives us a whole lot of mind candy, but there's no purpose now to life. Everything doesn't matter. So now people, it's just a natural thing that humans raised in that environment are going to react in unpredictable ways to test the reality of that, to test, to see if everything is just meaningless or not. And I believe that manifests as school shootings,
Yeah.
as these mass shootings that happen all over our country. I think it's because our country has such a materialistic view of reality, such a scientific materialism, that it sucked the life out of people. It sucked the purpose out of people. Now they feel like they have to do something. All they have is 15 minutes of fame, that they have to do something to be remembered, to mean something, to be real. And they don't care what that does to other people. They just have to do something to see, to test if they really exist, if they really matter, if their actions really have any impact in the world.
Yeah, I remember you were talking about that, like how the Caros kind of have maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but the Caros have kind of a similar view about that's when asked about why school shootings are so frequent in the northern United
Well, the
States.
Kiro can't conceptualize it to
Right,
begin
they
with.
don't even have a word for murder, right? Didn't
No,
you say?
they really don't understand it to begin with. And it's because I believe it's because they live such a purposeful life. They
Yeah.
have so much meaning. Everything really matters and means something in reality, that they don't have the view that we have of Earth being deaf, dumb, and blind, of resources being extracted for the purpose of becoming rich, becoming wealthy. This artificial thing that we have created. There's nothing wrong with wealth, but it is an artificial creation. It's something that we have done on purpose, and people don't seem to believe that. They have this idea that if you just work hard enough, or you just work long enough, that you can bring yourself up out of poverty, and you can do that to some degree. But we must always understand that it doesn't matter if it's capitalism, socialism, or communism, or some other monotheistic idealism. If it's dealing with economy, someone has to be on the losing end of that. For there to be someone rich, it means there has to be someone impoverished. For there to be someone that has too much, it means there has to be someone that doesn't have enough. And that's how those systems work. That's the only thing that makes money valuable, is that without it, you can't achieve certain things. And so it is all based on the limited view of reality, that reality is completely limited. Where we view reality most often as completely abundant. Now, there are a limited amount of certain things, but living energy is completely abundant. And if we can open ourselves up to living energy, and we can remove our expectations of how that living energy must manifest in our lives, then suddenly we can step into a flow with reality. And that flow with reality doesn't usually end with people being extremely wealthy, because it takes a whole lot to become extremely wealthy. And especially those people on the high level of that, the billionaires and things like that, whether they are responsible directly or not, somebody under them is abusing someone else and abusing their position to be able to manifest that amount of wealth. Somewhere, someone that they employ to do that is doing it. Even if they themselves are completely unaware of it, there is a level of material wealth that is not possible without playing bad politics with the world.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Jumping back a little bit again, it really does change things when you realize this, when you start to explore it, that idea that every single thing is alive and conscious and can be communicated with, which was something that was known by the ancients of the world over. And almost every single tribal culture in the world, they all knew that. And it really changes. And for example, I'm just thinking of an example of walking in the forest at the metro parks. And Eris and I do that. We come across a tree and we're able to feel the life in this tree and share energy back and forth, communicate in an energetic way with it, and share energy back and forth with it, and really having a beautiful experience communicating with this beautiful tree person. Whereas, another person's like, oh, okay, that's a deaf, dumb, dead, blind tree, just cut it down and use it to build a building. And whereas maybe we need to do that. Maybe we still need to build things, we still need materials and stuff, but I could see people like really choosing and honoring the spirit of that tree and asking it, like, hey, is this what you want? Are you okay with being used as building material? And if not, we'll ask another tree, and in that way, and those types of interactions, if everyone kind of functioned generally from that state of consciousness, it would bring so much more balance and harmony into this planet, I feel.
Sure. I mean, it would. It's just a different way of viewing reality. Everything being alive. That's one of the oldest ways of viewing reality. It's an animistic view of reality. And shamanism is when those animistic views became organized. And what I mean by that is it's when we started to realize there's a particular way to communicate with certain spirits. And they like certain things and they don't like other things. And that became traditions. And those traditions pass those things down. And that's another thing with modern spirituality. We think, and this comes partly from the Western mindset, that we should be privy to everything and have access to all of it all the time. And that, if you want to work with Shiva, you can just create your own little Shiva rituals and make up your own little experiences. And to some degree, that will work. And some people will say, well, Shiva will teach me how to be with Shiva. And to a certain level, that's true. But then there comes the level where there are it's like password protected regions of information. The reason why is because you have to rely on other humans to get there. It's the way it's set up. It was set up to make you have to deal with each other and the growth that comes from dealing with each other. So there is information, there is knowledge, there is experiences that you just cannot manifest by yourself. You need someone within that tradition to introduce you to that level of Shiva, to say, Shiva likes this. Well, couldn't Shiva just tell you that? Well, yeah, but Shiva won't, because it's about the tradition. It's about the passing on of this community. It's about creating communities. It's not about every person just being an island to themselves and alone in their own experience. That's lonely. That isn't uplifting at all. We are the spiritual world wants us to interact with each other. They want us to have problems with each other. They want us to find solutions with each other. They want us to develop that, because that's why we're here. Yeah. You were born for this. You were born to live this way. That's what being a human is all about.
So this is a beautiful note to say that coming up sometime in the next few months, we are starting the next round of apprenticeship. Speaking of needing to be in community and learn from other humans, we are starting another round of the apprenticeship for the Qatari tradition. Mm-hmm. And so the date isn't quite announced yet, but I will be one of the mentors. I'll be one of the people helping to teach the tradition. And of course, Zane is the primary teacher. And so if anyone's interested in that, please just follow along. Follow me on my social medias. All the links are in the description and everything. I'll put Zane's links in the description as well after this is over. And reach out if you really feel called. And there'll be information to read, and I'll be down here talking a little bit more about it. If you really feel called, like this is truly something for you, we'd love to have you as a part of this. I just wanted to bring that up. And
thank you for bringing that up. I mean, there will be information, but I anymore am of this different ilk. And I won't bore you with information and bore you with all kinds of, this is what it's going to do for you. What I do now is I put it out there as plain language as I can, and I try to make it as short as possible. I'd rather all that information be condensed to a short paragraph than be a whole page you have to read through. And I really want you to go with your heart. Look at it and just feel it. And if it sings to you, then do yourself the favor and jump in. If it doesn't, get the fuck away from it, because I don't want you there. That's really where I'm at now. I'm not trying to appeal to everyone with this. You'll know if I'm the right teacher for you, and just jump in or go away. And that's beautiful. That's not me being mean to any of you. It's me honoring what you know intuitively.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much, Zane. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful conversation, very enlightening in many ways, and I have a really fun time talking to you. I always enjoy listening to you talk. It's a beautiful time. So I want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome, brother.
Taking the time to come on. I hope to have you on again sometime soon. I'd love that.
All right, anytime. Just let me know in advance, and I can usually make the time.
Sounds good. All right. So I want to say to everyone who is watching, thank you so much for being here. We love you all so much. I'll just close with a Nike Koyeki Urpi Chai Sankolai, which is thank you. I love you. A dove from my heart to you. Bye, everybody.